Hi, and welcome to this mini lecture on the marketing mix for core management content. So when we think about marketing today, we are often interested not just in the way that physical companies market physical goods, we're also interested in the way that digital transformation of business has changed both the process of marketing, what's marketed, how it's marketed, and so forth. And before we can really understand this from a marketing perspective, we have to look at the different ways in which digital have transformed businesses more generally. Firstly, there's been a big rise in digital services. So things that used to be offered physically are now offered digitally, which creates new marketing opportunities for those companies. So instead of buying CDs, you might use Spotify. We've also got digital data. So things that used to be written down on pieces of paper and filed away are now stored digitally. And we've created things like big data sets as a result, which can be useful marketing tools. We also have digital media. So we don't physically read as many newspapers as we used to. We're much more likely to consume our media, whether it's news, TV programs, anything else in a digital form. And that's created new genres as well, such as podcasts and social media posts. So digital media has significantly transformed the range of products that can be marketed, but also the way that products are marketed. Digital platforms as well, so moving to a platform way of operating online and having those different spaces in which to market and in which to share and engage. And digital technology as a whole, which kind of encompasses these things, but also anything else that I haven't mentioned. So these sorts of digital transformations have made businesses very, very different and have made a variety of new products and services that can be marketed, as well as created new ways in which to market products and services. But what hasn't changed is the 4 Ps of marketing. So marketers have for many years talked about product, price, promotion, and place as the 4 pillars of the work that they do. And we'll continue to look at these in this session, just as you have done in the notes, and talk a little bit about each of these 4 Ps. And you can see on this slide a bit more detail about the types of things that each of the 4 Ps encompasses. If you haven't looked at the notes yet, it's worth pausing the video at this point to have a look down those lists. So first we'll start with product then. So marketers are interested in what product to market, and the product itself will impact how they market it. So that could be a product or a service. And products are what they do and how they do it. And so understanding what the product is, what it does and how it does it have really big implications for what you sell and how you sell it, how you market it. And they also have big implications for the other 3 Ps. So knowing what the product is that you're selling will have an impact on price, promotion, and place too. Market research can help you to work out what products it is that you would like to sell, or what services, and whether there's a market for those products and services. And we also talk about the core products or the augmented or enhanced products as well. So if we use the example of a car, a core product there is the car itself, the physical car. But when you buy a car new, you don't just buy a car, you buy other elements, you buy warranties, and you buy an after sales service as part of the product. And so there's an augmented product. Your core product is the car, and there are various augmented or enhanced elements that you also get as part of the product. Brand is a key element of product, and so we'll just spend a few moments thinking about it. I love the origin of the word brand. So brand came originally from using a branding iron, so literally a hot iron, to brand cattle and to mark their skin so that you know which farmer they belong to. Then branding a mark of quality became a common thing to do onto leather or onto licorice. So I went to the Haribo factory in France a few years ago and saw the brands that they used to stamp on the top of their licorice in the early days of Haribo, when licorice was still being made by pharmacies and sold in pharmacies. And they would have a stamp saying which shop it was from. So if you particularly liked that licorice, you would know to go back to the shop. So literally branding it. A brand still works similarly today. So it allows customers to differentiate products by different manufacturers. and it may have changed slightly in that it serves a number of additional kinds of purposes as well. But that fundamental aim of allowing us as consumers to differentiate the products that are made for us so we can make repeat purchases of those products or not is still a key function of branding. We can develop it out now though to look at a much broader definition. So please pause the video here and read the definition from the American Marketing Association of what a brand is. I've put in bold the key elements that we might want to think about because we see just how all-encompassing the idea of brand is. It can refer to a symbol, a name, logo, slogan, design scheme, and it can create brand recognition with the accumulation of experiences with the specific product or service that become associated with that product or service. And brand can then transform into something that represents implicit values, ideas, and even personality. And I just highlight the Starbucks roundel there because it's got a number of those components. It contains a name, it contains a very distinctive logo, there's a strong design scheme, and we start to build up a body of experiences as we choose to use or not use Starbucks, accumulating those experiences to build up a more sophisticated understanding of that brand and thinking about the kinds of values and ideas and personality that that brand has for us. So marketers will try and influence the way that we perceive the Starbucks brand so that it's in line with their values of something like serving neighborhoods one cup of coffee at a time, inspiring people in neighborhoods or something along those lines. So there's a close link there between what the marketers want us to think and the way that the stores are designed, the way that the brand is designed. Two things start to come together. Brands can contain a number of elements. They do have a number of elements. So the brand domain, so that's where the brand competes. Another way of saying the key target markets. There's the brand heritage, so the background and culture of the brand. It can be really interesting if you, for example, type in Starbucks historic branding or McDonald's historic branding or the Gap or John Lewis, any of the big brands that you might be familiar with, and you can see the way that the logo has developed over time and how the culture has developed over time, and therefore have this concept of brand heritage, which sometimes companies choose to really play on. So something like Burberry or John Lewis do work really hard to play on their brand heritage as part of their identity. Brand values are another brand element. So that might include core characteristics such as price, quality, and performance. What values do you associate with the brand in question? Brand assets, it might be a bit more tangible. So distinctive names, any individual symbols or unique images. There's the brand personality. What's the character of the brand? So if I asked you, what's the character of the IBM brand? And then I asked you, what's the character of the Disney brand? We're probably going to be using very different adjectives to describe those two things. And then finally, brand reflection. That's how the customer perceives themselves as a result of buying the brand in question. So how do we use that brand to reflect on ourselves and who we are as people? So we can think about this in relation to Coca-Cola. What I'd like you to do is pause the lecture and spend a couple of minutes thinking about these elements in relation to Coca-Cola. When you've jotted down some notes, unpause the lecture and I'll go through my thoughts on this. Okay, so hopefully you're back from having paused the lecture and thought about these questions in relation to Coca-Cola. Let's see how much our answers overlap. So in terms of brand name then, Coca-Cola has a very large brand name and seems to be looking to compete globally in the carbonated drinks market. So huge brand dominance, brand presence. It's got a strong brand heritage and occasionally brings back the retro branding. So I don't know about you, I get very excited when I see somewhere's got Coca-Cola in glass bottles with paper straws. It's nice to see that. Brand values of consistent taste, high quality, a caffeine boost. You could probably think of others as well. There are highly recognizable brand assets of name, logo, and can. So it's one of those brands that if you show it to a young child, they do a pretty good job of identifying what it was. It's a strong, fun, bold brand personality. That's what it tries to convey. And customers tend to perceive themselves as on trend and part of a long buying heritage if they buy the brand. So let's move on then to the second P. We've already looked at product. We're now going to look at price. And the price element of the marketing mix is focused on the price policies that a company sets, which are in turn used to set prices for products and services. And these prices can be a fundamental element of brand differentiation, whether you are a cost leader, whether you are seen to be reassuringly expensive, as I believe the Stella lager slogan used to be. So how do you can use you can use price as a signal of your brand. And we can compare approaches to price briefly. So we've looked at some of the work of economists in the past, and we can compare that to marketers. So economists see price as being a very straightforward thing, which is just set by the balance between supply and demand. So you set your price where supply and demand cross. And you'll have seen that if you studied economics. You charge the price according to economics, where supply can match demand and demand matches supply. So that is how you fix your price, simple, straightforward. Marketers think about price in a very different way, because they see price as playing a role in shaping demand, as it can alter perceptions of the product or service and brand, as well as altering levels and types of engagement in different market segments. So it's not just a case of a cheaper price driving higher sales, there will be other things going on too. So it's not about finding the price point where supply meets demand. Instead, it's using price to reflect quality, to generate sales, or maybe even aggressively push the competition out of the market. It can be used in a much more versatile way. And some common approaches to price are listed here. So you might think as a company about cost plus pricing. So this is very straightforward, where you let your costs set the minimum price you're prepared to sell your product for, and then make a decision on how much extra you want to add on top to increase the price. You can look at target profit pricing. So that's where you aim to achieve a certain amount of profit on a product over a period of time, which allows you some flexibility over flexing prices charged within that window. And it's a form, in a way, of discriminatory pricing. So if you look at airlines, they might look to make X amount of profit over a year and then flex prices accordingly so they can make that profit. Competition-based pricing is where competitors' prices set the ceiling for sales price. And so this means that you never charge more than your competitors. And in a market with high consumer power, this can unfortunately translate into a high level of pricing pressure, and some companies will really have to orient towards competition-based pricing. And then the final one we're going to think about, but there are plenty of other types of approach to pricing too, which you can see in the further readings, is market-oriented pricing, and we can divide that down into two elements. So one would be penetration pricing, which is charging cheap prices to enter a market, and then these prices rising as market share is built. And then another approach would be skimming pricing, where you charge premium prices to those parts of the market prepared to pay it before dropping the prices. So penetration pricing, where you do cheap prices and then raise it. Disney, Netflix, and lots of those online video services, streaming services, use penetration pricing. Skimming pricing is often used by mobile phones or by tech hardware companies to put out a new computer, new phone, new tablet, charging a premium price for a new, shiny, hot off the press product before then dropping the price and allowing it to be accessed by a wider range of the market. You can see this with the iPhone price skimming just here. The third element of marketing is promotion, and it relates to the ways in which marketing communications inform customers and other related stakeholders about firms, brands, and products. I think there's just something lovely about these old adverts that you can find, and I love this one for Kansas State Fair. So an early example of promotional activity or an advertisement for this state fair, with all kinds of things happening there. But digital has changed promotion quite heavily. So thinking about newspaper advertisements is a very limited way of thinking about promotion. Firstly, the number of touch points has increased because consumers bump into brands and companies and products a great deal more in a given period than they did before. In the past, you might only bump into them through adverts on bus shelters and newspapers and reading PR and so forth. But on our phones, we are constantly bumping into brands, products and services. So the concept of promotion has changed dramatically since the advent of the internet. And there's still lots of research going on to work out what types of promotions pay off for what types of products and services in which industries at which time of year and so forth. So we can then look at the different elements that we can consider in relation to promotions. So we've got a number of elements here. These are all quite straightforward. I'm just going to pick up on public relations. So public relations is where companies use staff that do PR, public relations roles, to put out media to try and increase brand presence, but without having to pay very often for those things. They're not like adverts. They're going to be something that actually looks to create a relationship with the public. So it might be blogs, podcasts, story placement in newspapers, magazines, or online platforms, links out to things, viral campaigns, using influencers to do outreach. A friend of mine's just launched a company selling changing robes. And one of the big elements that he is looking at is influencer outreach, so getting surfers, triathletes, and so forth to wear his brand. And the other one I will just pick up on quickly is direct mail, in case you don't know what I mean by that. So that's those kind of targeted email campaigns. So you sign up for the Hotel Chocolat or the Pret a Manger or the Hamleys email list, and they send you targeted messages. But GDPR, which is the legislation which requires consumers' data not to be given away, and there's other variations of this legislation globally, and depending on precisely how that legislation is applied, but it's become a more complicated field. So which of these sorts of promotion streams do you think Nike makes use of? I'd suggest pausing the video and again having a go at thinking or ticking which of these are ones that you believe Nike makes use of. So I would say that these are the areas that Nike is particularly good at using, the red ones. It's easy for us to find these without looking too hard. They clearly do a lot of advertising. They do a lot of PR, getting stories placed, getting influencers, outreach, things going on, you know, celebrities wearing their products and so forth. Sponsorship, huge sponsorship of athletes, events and so forth. Sales promotion with coupons and rewards on their website. Direct mail, so lots of email letters that they send out and so forth. They're all very, very easy to spot those. But I would actually say that Nike do the other three as well. So they've worked hard to develop AI chatbots on their platform to help with, I believe it is, trainer purchase. They will do trade exhibitions for like trainer exhibitions and so forth, webinars, seminars, etc. And they also will be making use of word of mouth, and particularly around viral marketing and social marketing. So the final of the four elements is place. Before the internet, place was focused almost entirely on how to distribute a product to meet the right customers, whilst simultaneously driving down the cost of transportation and storage. So physically moving stuff around as cheaply as possible. But now in an online environment, this idea of place has become much more nebulous, abstract, hard to understand, because there's so many ways to reach the customer, and often there isn't a physical place at all. If it's a service being delivered online, the concept of place becomes really hard to understand. So the routes to market for Nike before the internet, what do you think those were? And what do you think the routes to markets are now? So before the internet, it would have been very much about getting physical trainers out to stores. And if you read Phil Knight, who's the founder of Nike, if you read his book, Shoe Dog, the early chapters are obsessed with the way you physically get trainers to be made and pushed out to consumers in retail stores, and the battles that went on to try and be able to be the distributor for the big trainer brands. And that's why he decided to become to found Nike, was because he was so fed up with trying to secure contracts to be able to sell Onitsuka Tiger trainers across the US. So he decided to create his own trainers, but then they were then being sold in shops, their own shops, through other shops and so forth, potentially through catalogs. Now there are so many more ways that you can buy Nike trainers. You can buy them through specific Nike stores, through other trainer stores. So in the UK, we've got JD Sports, we've got Sports Direct, we've got Shoe. In your own country, you may have some of those, or you may have other brands of kind of general trainer or shoe stores. We have department stores, we have clothing stores. They've got their own website, and they've got websites of third-party retailers, and they're both sports websites and also fashion websites. So the ways that they can reach their market have exploded. That's it. That's all we're going to be looking at in terms of the 4 Ps in this mini lecture. So I hope you found it useful. It's been great speaking to you. and I look forward to hopefully hearing from you in some of the forums around this topic, and hope that you'll be watching some of the future seminars.